All right, hi everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. So, got my friend Chris, aka Tubin the Cable Guy, who I often talk with back here today, and we're going to do a fun nerd chat about Ancient Apocalypse, that new documentary series with Graham Hancock and him talking about the Younger Dryas Impact theory, and basically, which is that there was an apocalyptic bombardment of comets approximately 12,000 years ago. And he connects that to his theory that there was an advanced civilization approximately 12,000 years ago as well that was wiped out by this comet bombardment. And they are responsible for creating a lot of the famous megalithic structures like the pyramids in ancient Egypt thousands of years earlier than mainstream archaeologists previously believed. And there's some criticisms of him which I want to get into too, because I think most of them are unmerited, but I also am biased, so it's good to get into those a little bit. But yeah, anyway, so to start off with, what do you think about this whole topic, Chris? And how did you get into it in the first place? I know I was telling you before I started that the first Joe Rogan podcast I ever watched was the first one with Graham Hancock talking about this subject, and that's what got me interested in Joe Rogan's podcast.
Yes, same here. Well, it was in the first podcast I ever listened to, but same. Joe Rogan was my gateway drug to Graham Hancock, which was then my gateway to all this other stuff. And I'd been interested in like Egypt and Egyptology for a while, but I never heard of Graham Hancock until Joe Rogan. And funny enough, I remember going to at the time. It's Indigo now. Do you have Indigo out where you are,
The
or is it?
bookstore?
Yeah, the bookstore.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was Chapters here. It's Indigo now. As a side note, Indigo and Chapters is one of the worst bookstores on the planet Earth.
Yeah.
But anyway, I went to. I remember going after I saw the podcast. I remember going to Chapters that night and being like, "Oh shit, I gotta find." I think it was Magicians of the Gods I was looking for that night.
Was it I know the first one was Fingerprints of the Gods.
That's right.
Was it
Yeah.
was it that one or the
So
second one?
it was the second one because that's the
Okay.
one that the Fingerprints of the Gods was the one he wrote in like the 90s, I believe,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah.
was like the first one. And that kind of set the stage for all of his work, actually. But the one I was interested in when went to Chapters that night was, yeah, it was Fingerprints of the God, which was book number two. But I remember it was like I couldn't find it for the longest time. I was like, "What the fuck?" And I ended up because I don't usually use the keyboard search if I don't have to. I'm kind of like, like every guy, I'm kind of cocky and like, oh, as soon as I walk into Chapters, I know exactly where I can find this book. It's right in the
Yeah.
fucking history section.
Yeah.
Right in,
So let's spend a half an hour looking for it without asking
yeah.
anyone for help.
Yeah. Anyway, didn't ask for anybody help, but I ended up using a computer thing. It was in the pseudoscience section in Chapters,
Oh, I didn't even
and
know there
then
was a pseudoscience section.
yeah, well, there was here where I am, and it's very small. There's like one, like you know what I mean, one row or whatever, and all of his books are there. And then that's what I was kind of like, ooh, this is like got me. It got me more intrigued, to be honest. I was kind of like, oh fuck, this is like the section that nobody is supposed to buy books from. So anyway, I bought it, and then I've been down the Graham Hancock rabbit hole ever since. Read Magicians of the Gods, and I've read what's the one that he did about North America recently. I forget the name of it.
America Before.
Yeah, that's right. So I haven't read the first one, but I read those two, and I'm familiar with his other nonfiction books, but um, yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
read those ones.
I think I've read a few of his other nonfiction ones. I have one that's called Supernatural, which is more specifically about psychedelics and ancient cultures' practice of ritual psychedelics use, which is another topic he discusses in connection with the whole Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis idea, right? So, yeah, that's a really interesting one too. And yeah, I've read all three of his books in the kind of nonfiction trilogy about this theory. And it's interesting in reading the books, having read the books, watching the documentary series after that, seeing how much his theory has built up and gotten much more evidence behind it over the years. Like I think it was in Fingerprints of the Gods. It was before Göbekli Tepe, which was that ancient monolithic structure, which was discovered that uh, is at least 12,000 years old, possibly older, because they're still excavating it. And so that's one of many examples of evidence that that has been provided for his theory since then. Then he's built it up more in Magicians of the Gods, and then even more in America before, because the difference in that one is that there was this huge discovery that there were actually a lot of monolithic structures in North America, where a lot earlier than a lot of people thought that they existed too. And yeah, I got, like I said, I got interested in that theory at first from that first Joe Rogan podcast with Graham Hancock, and I was just fascinated, thinking like, whoa, the Sphinx might be like at least 7,000 years old instead of 4,000 years old. And then he talks about the geologist Robert Schoch examining details like the water erosion on the feet of the Sphinx and determining that it had to have happened when there was heavy rainfall in the Giza Plateau, which is when it would have been a rainforest, which had to have been at least 7,000 years ago. And there's all of those details to do with the ancient megalithic structures being lined up with constellations, because they believe really thoroughly in like the power of astronomy and astrology and that sort of thing. Yeah, there's so many fascinating details to do with this.
Yeah, there is. And um, yeah, a lot. I don't know. I think Graham Hancock's view of Egypt being, kind of, or human civilization being kind of in this, what does he like to say? We're in a state of pneumonia,
Oh,
or
a
state of
species with amnesia?
species with amnesia. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of interesting. I mean, it fills in a lot of gaps if you really, there's a lot of questions around, you know, Egypt, the pyramids, how they got there, the Sphinx, water erosion, even some of those vases and sculptures that were left over time. They did it invertedly, some of the sculptures that they did, and some of those like vases were really carved with very, really fine details, and you know what I mean? For people that were supposed to be hunter gatherers at this time, and knew little, they didn't know about DNA, or what I mean? They knew how to make fires, but other than that, weren't really on the up and up as far as, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah. That's one of that's one of the interesting aspects of Göbekli Tepe too, because they thought that it was supposed to have been hunter-gatherers around this time period, and they weren't supposed to have been sophisticated enough to have the tools to be able to build monolithic structures. Like they only had copper tools, for example. And that's interesting too that you mentioned that phrase that he uses, the a species with amnesia, because I hadn't looked into that many criticisms of him, but I relatively recently was listening to this podcast with uh, in which a historian was interviewing some archaeologists about Graham Hancock and his theories and stuff. And some of their with some of their criticisms, I basically just came to the conclusion that I don't know enough about archaeology to know who is right or wrong about these specific points that they're bringing up. But there's one in particular where they mentioned the phrase that he uses, species with amnesia, and this is the most ridiculous criticism of him. This is why people claim that he's a white supremacist, because apparently a white supremacist used this as a phrase in one of his books, even though his wife is black. And you could be a white supremacist and have a black wife, possibly, but that seems like it would be a recipe for self-torture or something if you're going to marry a black woman and you're a white supremacist. And then also it's it's a generic enough phrase that I'm sure tons of people have come up with that term throughout history and thought it was original to them or something like that. He probably doesn't even has never even heard of this guy, or that known that he is a white supremacist or anything like that.
Yeah, the smears of him are interesting, and I mean, they grow with anybody that becomes popular, right? I mean, there's just going to be more smears, but for him, he's always been like I said. I found this book in the pseudoscience section of chapters when I first was looking for him. So he started off kind of in the wacky professor, pseudosciencey kind of, and he's still there, right? If you talk to any kind of academic, they would probably dismiss most of his ideas still to this day, even though it's kind of floated into the mainstream. And and they made this Netflix documentary that we're going to talk about, about it. So it's kind of like what's been interesting is to see as this guy has started off in the 90s by having these wacky ideas, and as the science has kind of progressed, with what do they call it, core
Carbon
technology,
dating?
carbon dating, and different kind of like Gobekli Tepe, for example. They didn't find that in the back in the 90s when he was first writing about these ancient civilizations. So there's evidence that has come forward that um, not necessarily works in Graham's favor, but it makes his overall thesis of us being, once a society that was more intellectual than just hunter gatherers, and then
Yeah.
younger Dryas happens, and then we do a reset, and we have to start all over again.
Hmm.
That theory slightly moves into wacky, crazy conspiracy theory too. Hey, plausible, still kind of, you know what I mean? Who knows? Nobody knows. But it's funny how his story has shifted him more into being more accurate as technology has kind of, progressed over the last even just 20 years for him, right? So,
Yeah, new archaeological findings and that sort of thing.
mhm. I
Yeah.
wonder if any of that got disrupted. I don't know if you heard, but there was a massive earthquake in that area, Turkey and Syria or whatever. I wonder if any of the
Oh, yeah. I heard about the one in Syria. Yeah, now that you mention it.
yeah, and I think that's right in that region where I don't know where Göbekli Tepe is in, like where close, if it's close to those earthquakes. But I wonder if any of those aftershocks or any of that impacted it at all.
That's a good question. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wonder that. Is it one? I'm gonna Google that. Is Göbekli Tepe near the recent earthquakes?
Yeah, because I think this not that Göbekli Tepe is necessarily a silver bullet for Graham's case, but it's like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's like it's hard to refute if you're an archaeologist. I'm not an archaeologist at all. I'm just a cable guy. But you know what I mean? I would think that if you have this thing that's been covered in dirt that we didn't know until like 15 years ago, that's apparently like, what is it, 30,000 years old or something like that?
Yeah, it depends on who you believe. I forget. Oh yeah, have you heard Graham Hancock talking as well, and seen on Joe Rogan's podcast that other guy who studies this topic named I think his name is John. I'm gonna look it up. John Anthony,
Yeah,
I believe it is, that old guy who thinks that these monolithic structures are even older than someone like Graham Hancock or Robert Schoch, and I think he believes like the pyramids and the Sphinx, for example, go up to 36,000 years, something like that.
yeah, yeah. I know who. Yeah, I've heard of John Anthony West. I'm familiar with that guy as well. Um, I believe he was the guy that didn't he pass away?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he died recently. Oh yeah, he died in 2018, I guess.
Yeah. Um, the other two guys that are interesting are. Did you recently watch Jimmy Corsetti and what? I'm just looking it up right now. And Ben Van whatever on Joe. It was episode 1928. Anyway, they were heavily influenced by Graham's work, and they were
Oh
on.
yeah, I did see that. They have a YouTube channel where
That's
they're
correct.
talking about archaeology and stuff, right? Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, they're the YouTube channel or the video one video watch was making the case for Plato when he was talking about what's that ancient civilization,
Atlantis or
Atlantis. Yeah, that's right. They think that Atlantis might be I think it's in Africa or something like that, where they think it might be, or somewhere. Yeah. Anyway, they make a good case for it, but it was interesting how they were on there, and their work has also been influenced by Graham's
hmm
work. So, um, yeah, even
and
it doesn't matter how accurate he is at this point going forward. I mean, he's influenced other people, and I think he's brought a lot of people into archaeology if you're not into archaeology, and if you're into archaeology, he's made you probably question some of your past beliefs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and another guy who's also in that Ancient Apocalypse documentary and who's been on Joe Rogan podcasts, both by himself and with Graham Hancock, is Randall Carlson, who I think he's actually a geologist. So he studies more specifically the geology of stuff. And he has talked more. I think he was, if I remember correctly, the reason that Graham Hancock connected his theory of advanced civilizations to the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis that Randall Carlson was talking about, and that contributed to Graham Hancock writing about ancient megalithic structures in North America, because these were all taken out by comets during the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis. And so yeah, all of the Randall Carlson is really interesting too, and you can see when he's on Joe Rogan's podcast, for example, how phenomenally thorough he is.
Yeah, I like guys like that who are really passionate about, and like me, it wouldn't even matter accreditation. You know what I mean? You can say that Randall Carlson is just some guy living in a trailer and not even having any degrees, but for him to be just so invested, and you can tell he's invested like his pretty much his whole entire life into at least to study in North America, you know, with the ice glaciers and that kind of stuff and the melting and the waters. And yeah, he was probably super influential to Graham on that latest book about North America.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just basically we're talking about an accumulation of evidence, which doesn't necessarily mean that something is true, but that can be the reason that something is true too. One major example of that is evolution, of course. The reason that evolution is a provable theory, or at least phenomenally likely to be true, is that there's this massive accumulation of evidence in multiple different fields. And that's what's starting to happen with the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis too, because we're talking about multiple fields like archaeology and geology, and I'm sure several other related fields have been investigating this sort of thing too.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine they are. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. They're always,
so there were, sorry, go ahead.
they're always investigating. I was just getting into a National Geographic, documentary series about Rome, for example, and there's just archaeologists doing the same thing. They were unearthing this whole entire ancient city that was in this part of Europe. They used to be part of Rome, and they're finding, you know, little things and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I find that stuff fascinating. I just, again, I think like all of us would agree, it's the closed-mindedness of those that are in power currently. You know what I mean? That you know, say that yeah, Egypt can only be 6,000 years old, and that's it, and that's the end of the story, and we solved everything, and that's it. But that goes
Yeah,
that's the arrogance of human nature, I guess.
yeah, and Graham Hancock talks about that a lot too, about how um, basically any field in mainstream science takes a long time to adapt their theories, because they get so set in their ways and what they think is the only correct way of viewing things. That seems to tend to happen in other fields of science, in fields of science in general too. Well, another example that I'm sure you probably heard too is Eric Weinstein talking about how this ossification in physics in terms of string theory, for example, and how it hasn't really gone anywhere, and this like the establishment in physics hasn't just is not open to the idea that this field is going nowhere, and they should be studying other realms of physics instead. Similar sort of thing there.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I wasn't aware of that, but that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wonder how many avenues science has gone down that doesn't really make a difference at all. You know what I mean? Where it's
Yeah, yeah, and
studying
that's
one thing.
another interesting aspect of this, because I often in my videos I'll criticize people who are talking about like anti-establishment views on science and stuff. But in this topic in particular, the consequences are not that big of a deal if it turns out that Graham Hancock is wrong and all of those other people or anything like that, because we're talking about ancient history. It doesn't really have any impact on us. So that's why it's so much fun to think about and investigate.
Yeah, it would all it would it's like it's a vicious circle because it would impact only those that are in power of institutions that are there to protect the history of it being the high school history that you were taught in high school of Egypt and Cleopatra and all that kind of stuff, which that's true to a certain extent, but a lot of that closes a lot of doors as to what I mean. I know people like make fun of like Egypt was made by aliens, but I don't know,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and well, that's another criticism of people like Graham Hancock too, because they exaggerate how massive his theory is. Because he's made it clear many times that he's not positing the ancient aliens theory or something like that. And by advanced civilization, he means basically advanced in the fields of science and the technology that they had access to at the time. So they would have been really advanced in engineering and geology and math and that sort of thing. So they would have been hyper advanced to the point of maybe even being just advanced as us or possibly even more so. But it's not like they had magic powers or anything like that. That's one aspect that Graham Hancock gets into, that this advanced civilization were were thought to be gods by some of these ancient societies, and they say that they built the monolithic structures and stuff. And his theory is that these people would have seen them as aliens or gods or something like that because they would have had such sophisticated knowledge about science and geology and that sort of thing. So that's why people talk about that sort of stuff in the mythology to do with these monolithic structures, which is another really fascinating aspect of this whole topic.
yeah, yeah. I think they just did. I mean, I think they were advanced, but not advanced like we have. We're able to stream here right now through internet-based technology. I don't think they were that advanced. And maybe who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not. I'm not closing the door to that.
I mean, like maybe they had like some sort of way of. I've read a few books about this too. Like they could form some sort of primitive drill or something like that with no, which wouldn't have been advanced. So that would explain how they could have been able to actually build these structures and have the blocks aligned so perfectly in the pyramids and that sort of thing. I don't mean like they had internet or anything like that. I mean
Yeah,
like they would have seemed hyper advanced to the people at that time. Like you can figure out how to do all of these things with just your magic knowledge of calculating them with math or things like that.
yeah, and that's a perfect math is a perfect way to kind of if you're ever bored, go down the rabbit hole and look up Egyptian math on YouTube, and you'll see that they were able to do math similar to the way we do math today and come up with the same results and equations. They just went about it in a different way. I forget. I remember when I went down this rabbit hole years ago when Graham was going through Egypt and um, all those guys, Michael Shock and all those guys. And I remember watching a video on some old, it was a video from the 80s, it looked like, but some like guy talking about Egyptian mathematics. And essentially, it was just like, this is how they did it. And it was just like, it was a different way of coming up with the answer. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So that's what I mean, like why I think that they were an advanced uh, technological civilization, but I think they
yeah,
would, you know what I mean? Like how did they make these pyramids, for example, all these blocks to act on top? Well, they didn't have like cranes like we probably did today, or they had something very similar. Maybe it was some kind of pulley system. It did the same. The end result was the same. It was just the method to get there was maybe a little bit different than the way we did it today.
yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, well said. That's exactly how I would put it too. Yeah. So one interesting aspect of this Ancient Apocalypse documentary series was that Graham Hancock went into detail about a lot of other megalithic structures that I hadn't heard of before. Like he
Mm-hmm.
didn't focus that much on Egypt because he often is
No.
focused on Egypt, especially in his first two books, Fingerprints of the Gods and Magicians of the Gods. But he went kind of all over the world in this one too, and focused on North America too, and then a whole bunch of places in like parts of Africa and the Middle East and whatnot. So yeah, that was a really fascinating aspect of this documentary series too.
Yeah, that was fascinating. But yeah, how did you overall feel about the series? Just to backtrack for a bit before we get into it, like, did you on a grading A, B, C, D? You know what I mean? Because I'm not gonna lie, man. I thought it was kind of meh. I wasn't really like blown out of the water by this series, and I lean more towards a C or a D on the overall what Netflix kind of did with him here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see that. I'm not sure. I'd say maybe a C or so. I think part of that though is because like you and I already knew kind of the main ideas behind these theories and stuff. So it was
Mm-hmm.
kind of just adding more onto that. And it seemed like it was designed for people who hadn't heard of any of this stuff before, so they were kind of over dramatizing stuff and that sort of thing. So
Yeah. No,
yeah.
it was annoying. I was joking with my brother the other day. I felt like every scene he was like, remember Steve Irwin, the crocodile guy that was like,
Oh yeah,
"Oh,
yeah.
over here, there's a crocodile, and she gotta be quiet." I felt like every scene with Graham Hancock was literally like, "We can't go over there because the academics don't like me over here.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
shh, don't say anything. We can't go over here." And then next scene, it was like, "Oh, the academics, they don't like me here, so we don't talk about that over here." Everything was the same with
Hmm.
that, where it was all like
Yeah, true.
repetitive. Like, all right, buddy. After episode 4, I think it was like, all right, I get it. We get it, buddy. The academics don't like you, and you're
Hmm.
perceived in the science community as a pseudoscience. But you've obviously sped past that because you have a Netflix series that I'm wanting to watch right now. But that going back to what you said earlier about there was different pyramids all over the place, and that's why they didn't really get into Egypt. I kind of wish he would have got into some of this stuff that he got into with Graham that attracted me to him in the first place. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. He seems
Like he,
to he seems to kind of be a specialist in ancient Egypt almost, I would say.
yeah, and he didn't touch on Egypt at all in this series, which I get it. You're not allowed. He's not allowed to go there anymore, so that's a huge, like, you know what I mean. And for Netflix to have a film crew falling around and him not able to go to the premises anymore, I'm sure that's why they didn't cover that. But at the same time,
Oh, he
that's a
can't go
huge.
there anymore?
Yeah, he was kicked out, and that's one of his Steve Irwin things. Hello, I can't go to Egypt
Oh,
anymore.
I forgot
Yeah,
about that.
the academics, they
You
don't
see, the
like me.
Wally academics won't let me in Egypt anymore.
No, they don't like me. They don't. They call me a pseudo. Yeah, we get it, buddy. You know what I mean. But yeah, I think he missed out on Egyptology, and he missed out on like all that kind of cool stuff about, like, we were talking, the vases and the different, you know, didn't really get into that much in the series. Which, yeah, you can always go back to his books and his work and that kind of stuff. But if you're just getting introduced to Graham Hancock for the first time, you should at least have maybe a little bit of that into the series. So
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point because I said that it seemed like they made it for people who hadn't heard of any of this stuff before. So, yeah, that's a good point, especially if you hadn't heard of any of the details to do with this subject
mhm.
before. I think you would be more into it if they had gotten into more detail about ancient Egypt in particular, especially since just just the fact that that's probably one of the most well-known, if not the absolute most well-known megalithic structures. Like everyone's heard of the ancient pyramids of Egypt and the Sphinx and all of those structures.
Yeah, like, don't get me wrong, the new stuff that he did bring forward, like, I thought the underground city, that he kind of like looked like Ant City when they brought out that whole graph. I forget where that was, but that was all interesting. And all that kind of stuff is interesting. But if you're trying to, I don't know, if you're trying to make the case, and I'm not saying that he's using this Netflix series as him making the case as he should be looked upon as some kind of academics,
Oh yeah, of course.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But if you have the opportunity to educate people or introduce, yeah, a whole new audience to what you're kind of all about, I would think that you would bring some of that old and some of the new into it. And the old, I still think, like, and what I mean by old is like Egypt stuff and the stuff that he did with Randall Carlson, like, which he did at the end. Like Raymond Randall did that scene at the end. Um, but yeah, majority of his like core work or the hard hitting evidence that he had was kind of left out of this Netflix series for some reason.
Yeah, that's true. He did seem to focus on newer stuff for that, which for the most part he hadn't focused on that much before. And but it was cool that he was going into so many different places. And yeah, like one example is that underground city. I thought that was really cool. And the like that's another aspect of this that's so fascinating too, that he taught in terms of the like the ancient religions and mythology of different people and what they have to do with these megalithic structures. The underground city, I think Graham Hancock's theory was that that was built to take refuge from basically natural disasters, which and which is also what he connects to ancient flood myths like Noah and the Ark and all of the other various religions before and after Christianity that had flood myths, and how this could be due to the Younger Dryas Impact theory because the bombardment of comets caused all of this massive tidal flooding and all of these massive fires and that sort of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's another interesting aspect too about how he talks about how a lot of some of these ancient structures might have been built as refuges from natural disasters or as the only way to preserve their culture for the future because they knew their civilization was going to be wiped out and they wanted future people to be able to know that they had existed.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do find the flood thing because you see it's so consistent across multiple religions. Obviously, Christianity, like you said, with Noah and the Ark, but I believe uh, Judaism and Hinduism and uh, all have flood myths within their traditions as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
And that could be just like it's often like used as what's the word I'm looking for? Um, yeah, it's often used as like a reset or whatever, like a flood. But yeah, if the Earth, it makes sense to me that if the Earth was covered a majority in ice, and that all melted away or whatever, or a comet hit that brought up the Earth to a certain amount of really really hot temperature change within a fast amount of time, then yeah, that you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's interesting. Have you heard of the poles shifting theory? I forget where I heard this the other day, but I was in a
I
podcast,
don't think I
obviously.
have.
Something to do like it takes. Apparently, this has happened a bunch of times before, and Elon Musk has hinted at if you really want to go down a rabbit hole, type in pole shifting. But it's essentially, I think that what he's talking about is the poles have shifted from like north and south in the Earth's rotation, and when it does that, it obviously it spins, but all that water, you know what I mean, causes it to go absolutely berserk. And some scientists believe that we've shifted poles a few times, and that's also what's caused everything to ice age, flip, water, also move continents, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that reminds me of another few aspects of the theory. One is that the evidence for the comets during the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis are that they find all over the world this basically volcanic ash that has to have either come from volcanoes or meteorites or nuclear warheads. And again, like no one's saying no, it's ancient aliens, bro. So it was nuclear weapons. No, it's that it was probably this is evidence of comets. And uh, yeah, that's the other thought I had. He also talks about how there might have been a land bridge between continents, which is how an advanced civilization or perhaps multiple civilizations might have navigated from one continent to another rather than traveling by ship, which is the only way they thought was possible at the time. And yeah, that reminded me of another detail too that Graham Hancock talks about, which is that there is this map from the 1500s, I believe it was, that had Antarctica on it, and no one is supposed to have even known that Antarctica existed at that time. So maybe that could possibly be connected to the theory of the poles shifting too. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe, or I mean, maybe they just hadn't, or maybe they had or hadn't explored that area yet. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
One
Yeah,
of my
there,
favorite books is if you ever get a chance, I know this has nothing really to do with it, but it kind of does. Madhouse at the End of the World. Have you ever read this book?
no.
It's about the Belgica and Captain Cook. And one of the first ships that ever traveled and explored the whole Antarctic region. But anyway, yeah, phenomenal book. But essentially, because it's like disaster after, like these guys go up against everything, you know what I mean? And everything goes wrong the whole way. They stop in a port in like South America, and they have to lose a guy because he's like drunk, and he sets fire to half of the ship, and then they have to like, or no, sorry, the ship gets caught in like a reef or something like that. They have to fix it, and then they made Antarctica. I won't give the whole thing away, but basically they get stuck there for a whole winter. They almost die, you know, blah blah blah. But yeah, going back to your map of Antarctica there, what I was getting at is that Antarctica was such a like, you know, what I mean, back then we go to Antarctica today, like Metallica makes a music video in Antarctica, you know what I mean? But like for them back 100 years ago to go to Antarctica was like a fucking, that was hard to do, you know what I mean? Yeah, you needed a
Yeah.
ship, you needed a crew. So maybe they weren't doing that much. And a lot of captains didn't want to risk, because it's not like they had the, like, you know, most of those ships were made out of wood and put together really shitty by slaves back then, right? So it's not like they had the icebreakers and the steel boats like we had today. So most captains back in 300 years ago, they didn't even want to explore anywhere in the south, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of them, they didn't know how to hunt, you know.
Yeah. You're likely
Uh,
to lose, like, it was likely to be a case that some of your crew is going to die, almost a guarantee.
yeah, for sure. Like finding food in the North or South Pole. What's his name talks about that in his book, Secret of Our Success. Heinrich, where they
Oh yeah, Joe Henrik.
Joe Henrik, yeah, where they talk about like the knowledge that is needed to even hunt and kill like a seal up north, like the Inuit or whatever, you know. So yeah, a lot of captains wouldn't even go excursioning to a North or South Pole back in the day. So maybe they didn't include that in the maps. Sorry to make a long-winded point here, but maybe they didn't include that in the maps of Antarctica because they never really traveled down there. Who knows?
Yeah, that's entirely possible for sure.
Yeah, I do find the whole city of Atlantis um, thing interesting though, because just passed down tradition. Why was Plato even mentioning it? And does he mention it in what's his book, Republic Mathematica, or what's his main?
The Republic.
Yeah, is it in
Yeah,
that book
the
that he mentions it?
I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, I've read that
Yeah,
before, and this is like the whole Atlantis idea. That's where I get off of this theory. I would say the like for one thing,
like you
the
don't believe there
this
was a city of Atlantis before?
no, I don't really think there was. I think maybe there was some sort of advanced civilization or advanced city that is now underwater, and that perhaps that's connected to the Younger Dryas Impact theory. But in terms of Plato's quote, for example, that people always mention, he meant that he was kind of meaning that as a metaphor of this sort of utopian place or something. He wasn't being literal about that. And uh like I've read a few books about Atlantis because it is an interesting theory, but for me that seems to have more questions behind it and a lot less confirmable evidence than just like the theory of a lost civilization, and particularly the Younger Dryas Impact theory.
Yeah, see, it might not even be Atlantis. I'd be sold if like somebody were to say there was a city like Panama City, for example, right? If there's a city like Panama City before the Younger Dryas period, yeah, I think that's totally believable. Atlantis to me was kind of like yeah, a utopia, but also kind of like a port city where like a whole bunch of, you know what I mean, nations would come together, and that was like the main. It would be like a New York City or a London, England today. Like if you were to think of like the major capitals of the world, if an alien were to drop in here and say, you know, what's the city I should go visit or something like that, right? So maybe it
Hmm.
was something like just like Panama City, where it was just like a port city, and people went there through trade. Because I do think that, and Graham brings this up in the in the Netflix series. I do think that there's something to do with all these pyramids, right? The pyramids are they're all the kind of same. They're all in the shape. There's these different like symbols that you see all over the world, right? The Mayans had pyramids, for example. The Egyptians had pyramids. There was pyramids in I think Philippines was another place they go and visit, or
Yeah,
maybe Thailand or something like that. And they're
yeah,
not
and a
all
lot
the
of them are, and a lot of them are lined up with the same, like with the same constellations or something like that too, which is another interesting connection between all of them, or at least a lot of them.
yeah. And I've seen people make the comparison to a skyscraper today, right? Like there's skyscrapers in Tokyo and New York and London. They all don't look the same. They look a little bit different, but you can still, there's, you know what I mean? They're 100 stories high. They're built like a rectangle. You know what I mean? They're very kind of similar in a way. And I think that the pyramid structure was, and what I'm getting at here, another long winded point is that I think that we think of the ancient times before the Younger Dryas period as just, yeah, hunter gatherers. They stayed in Asia, they stayed in North America, or they stayed in Europe, whatever. They never come to North America. But I think Graham makes a very interesting point that they were traveling all over the world. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
They were traveling from Europe to South America. They were traveling from India to Europe, at least. You know, there was a lot more traveling amongst these tribes than we, you know what I mean? So if they were traveling these far, vast distances, then yeah, sure, that you don't do traveling like that without some trade kind of involved or some kind of low level geopolitics. Um, and there you go. There's your advanced civilization right there, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, certainly not like so-called primitive hunter-gatherers. They had a more advanced political system and more advanced traveling capabilities, map making abilities, and ability to build structures and that sort of thing. I mean, whether that's evidence for something like Atlantis in particular is debatable, but that in general having existed for some sort of civilization seems likely.
Yeah, and maybe they were tuned into like I find music interesting, for example, because I make music. Side side note, check out my music online. But
Yeah,
anyway,
your new video is good.
thanks, man. But since I make music, I find music just fascinating. Like, why am I attracted to music? And obviously, like, there's some kind of DNA. All my uncles and aunts on my mom's side play music, right? So there's some kind of like that. But I think it's weird how like music is kind of like ingrained to us. And like the pyramids are like apparently there's some kind of audio thing to the pyramids. You can yell from the bottom floor and hear everything up the top is crystal clear or something like that. So I think the ancients were clued into manipulating audio or using it in a way differently than we use it today. Like a lot of, unfortunately, today audio is used for junk, right? It's like majority of McDonald's top 40 is digested through Spotify, which is also junk, right? So a majority of
Mhm.
our the way we absorb
Also,
music.
also as a sorry to interject, but
No,
as a musician, especially, I wonder if you agree with me about this, that the auto tune is the worst invention in musical history.
yeah, it is. It's bad, and I'm not gonna lie, I use it a lot. It's I think the and this is getting off topic, but I think the key is it's like everything in life, it's balance, right? So you want to be able to use that auto tune so that your vocals sound decent and pitch good, but you don't want to oversaturate it where you sound like, you know, Weekend or Drake and it's like robotic voice, you know what I mean?
Oh, okay. I thought it only sounded like that.
You can lay off the gas on auto tune and have it so that it's like correcting a little bit of pitch, but not so much. There's a way
Oh,
to
okay.
adjust it. The problem is today any top 40 music or song that you hear, those vocals are just auto tuned to the max. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like
it's
fucking
so annoying.
yeah.
I
it's compressed, it's saturated. It's like McDonald's, right? It's sold as like this great meal, but it's covered in saturated oils and yeah, shit that's all bad for you. But you think that it's like, you know what I mean? It tricks your body into thinking that it's good.
Yeah. It's like, okay, so we're gonna throw in some auto tune and like this heavy bass beat, and that's gonna be a song.
Yeah, for sure. But it's like, yeah, unfortunately, that's where we are with music these days. But I think that's where we are culturally with music in society. It's kind of like a dumbed down version of music, like the lowest kind of common denominator is popular. Like the Grammys just happened the other night, and that was a complete disaster. I don't think anybody even watches that anymore. And if you do, yeah, but
But
you know what I mean? Like,
all I saw was like people complaining about Harry Styles doing this apparently satanic performance, which I'm sure he did to piss people off and succeeded in doing so.
yeah, no, Sam Smith.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
yeah,
did.
not Harry Styles. I barely even know who those two people are, so that's why I confuse them.
Yeah, no, I know who they are. Harry Styles actually he did the performance, but people are complaining about his voice sounded horrible. And there's a perfect example of how you know what I mean. You can listen to his latest recording, and then you can go listen to that live performance. And even that live performance that he did was tweaked. You know what I mean? They're still able to compress and do his vocals live and add some auto
Oh,
tune
I
to
didn't
that
even know that.
as
Wow.
it's coming through. So if it sounds bad even with an auto tune like that, imagine what he sounds like if he was sitting next to you singing, right? So
Yeah.
but again, there's a perfect example. Though, like Sam Smith and him, like those guys, they can't. Maybe they can play an instrument, but you know, most of them are just singer songwriters. Most of them have like a team of 30 people behind them that are making all their music for them. They're not. They're just the. You know what I mean? They're like the figurehead or the president, and yeah, they're not really doing anything. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. But what I wanted to kind of
This
get
is
to.
this reminded me of did you see those South Park episodes where in which it is revealed that Randy Stan's dad is Lord and he transforms
No,
he trans he transforms himself singing in the bathroom on his lunch break with auto tune and stuff into songs.
so ridiculous. That reminds me. I think season 26, episode 1 just came out. I gotta watch that.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen it yet. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry,
no,
I just piled onto our tangent there.
yeah, no, that's all good. I just to wrap up really where I was going was that comparing music of today, where it's kind of McDonald's and trashy, and yeah, it's good. There's a lot of good music out there, but what the masses use music for is nothing really, right? But in Egypt, I wonder if they use like, um, or sorry, not just Egypt, but in ancient times, I wonder if they use music or just sounds in general to do different kind of like maybe carrying transmissions of warnings of war or tribes along long distances or stuff like that. I think they were able to manipulate sound waves and do different things with music and hymns that we're doing in a stupider version today.
Are you saying though you're not saying though that they like I've heard some people come up with theories like this with the wackier theories about how they built the pyramids like dude they could manipulate sound so that they could just move the blocks by using sound.
Yeah, no, I'm not necessarily that. But like it's some along the lines of like, okay, have you ever heard a really good song that blows your mind and you're like, okay, this is cool. But then you get some songs that are just really blow your mind and are emotionally like they touch you, they make you cry. You look on your skin and you got goosebumps and they make you shiver. Like it touches you and it touches humans at emotional that not a lot of art do, right? You can go to the Louvre and you can look at a bunch of art paintings, but it's rare that somebody looks at that or goes to a movie theater or goes to like, you know what I mean, and walks out with goosebumps on that. A majority of music, there's some in humans, and not every human, but a majority of humans where music touches. Even my dad, who never plays an instrument in his life, likes music. Do you know what I mean? So
Hmm. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
able
I mean,
to.
for me too. I've tried playing guitar a few times, but never really stuck with it. And there are tons of songs that are some of my favorite songs ever, and I'm gonna keep listening to them forever. And they just make me feel like they're just profoundly powerful, and they just have a visceral. They just make you feel them viscerally, really.
Yeah, there's songs, if I have a family member that passed away, there's songs that I can't listen to or songs that I want to listen to, you know what I mean? There's songs that, if I'm working out or riding my bike, there's, you know what I mean, I want to throw on whatever
Yeah,
hard, smashing
yeah,
fucking thundering guitars or pumping in my ears. So music, what I'm getting at is, yeah, music has a way to kind of influence us and change our emotions. And we use it today in kind of a lazy way to manipulate our emotions, or most of it is just sold to for profit, unfortunately. But I think Egyptian or ancient people, and you see this a lot in religion, right? If you ever go to like a Latin mass or something like that, right? Or if you talk to anybody that's like pre or pre-Vatican II enthusiast or an Orthodox Christian, it's the Latin mass or it's the hymns and the what I mean, that move you within that mass. Um,
hmm
and if
yeah. I
mass didn't
wanted,
have,
I wanted to like, even though I'm an atheist, I wanted to go some sort of Latin or Orthodox mass or service like that, just because there's so much more. There seems like so much more immersive pageantry and making it like a celebration and that sort of thing, like you were talking about. And I bet that's the sort of thing where it would be really fun to get baked and go to that because it would seem surreal.
yeah, it is surreal, man. I've been to like I'm not like super religious. I'm not super atheist. Yeah, you know me. I'm kind of like whatever. I think human beings are religious in just in our nature, right? Whether that be Christianity or whatever, Hinduism. But I think, yeah, I remember once I was at a Latin mass and it was a priest was being ordained, and it was just like the feeling of that singing and just like the incense that they were burning. There was something to that, and maybe just it was just a room of everybody being in there doing the same thing, being really quiet, and you know what I mean. But it honestly felt like God was in the room that day, and I remember thinking back, like, okay, if this is as close to God being in the room to me, this is it, right? And it's not like I didn't walk out of that room that day being like, oh my God, Jesus, you know what I mean, changed my life or anything. I just remember feeling that it was like something else is going on here that is kind of like beyond just me in this room. Do you know what I mean? And maybe that's just everybody's atoms talking amongst one another while this weird music is going on in the background. But yeah, religions use Gregorian chants as another perfect example, right? If you look at even who are those Napoleon guys, the Dalai Lama, those kind of guys, they use hymns and meditation with you know yeah, it's music and some kind of rhythm has always been kind of been with us, yeah,
Hmm
throughout history, right? So there's
Yeah,
something to
and
music, and I think ancient times were more honed in and more tuned into sounds and music than we are today.
you could see that you could see that especially in terms of these megalithic structures, some of them in particular for sure, and like how you were talking about how they built the pyramids where you could make a sound at the bottom and hear it at the top, and you could easily see how they could use them for some sort of religious ceremony or something like that, because this has been basically part of this taking religion extremely seriously has been part of human culture for basically all of human civilization. So that's like we've mentioned a few times now, there definitely is some sort of religious aspect to these megalithic structures, whether we know what it is or not. And a lot of them are about the dedicated to the afterlife, basically.
Yeah. So like they probably, if I were to make a comparison, maybe we have like the atom more figured. Like we've got the atom really. We've been able to split the atom. We can make a nuclear bomb out of it. We can do so many things scientifically that they probably weren't able to do in ancient civilizations. But maybe the equivalent applied to them. Maybe they were able to manipulate music and do different things that we're not able to do today. But they weren't able to manipulate atoms at all, or if they did, it was some kind of McDonald's version of it. They didn't really have the science to figure out anything else past that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
I don't know. It's interesting. I find and I think Graham has talked about this before, like where different comet star dust has created chemicals that might have caused us to, you know, impact different soils and different, you know, vegetation out of that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's an interesting aspect of that too, for sure. I forgot about that one.
yeah. The water thing is interesting. I live right around the Great Lakes, so in Ontario here, so that always kind of where I am is probably was under 200 feet of ice at some point. So
Right,
um,
right.
I always find that, yeah, that kind of stuff interesting. How we were able to, yeah. I think they said at some point estimates were at like 10,000 humans were possibly on the planet after the Younger Dryas Impact.
Yeah,
And I
yeah, we
mean,
came super close to extinction.
yeah, we came super close to extinction. And I people hear 10,000, and that's just a guesstimate. Maybe it's 20, maybe it's 5, who knows, right? But yeah, for us to be able to still adapt and thrive after that is kind of remarkable if that's the case. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, if you the Younger Dryas took out everybody, it was like dark for 3 months straight and black and soot, and then there was volcanoes erupted. And it was just chaos for like fucking such a crazy amount of time, and humans, so many people were, you know what I mean. Of course, that tradition never carried on 100% afterwards, and that's why we're left with these essentially with a history that's a religious history, um, as picking up the pieces to kind of create our this what we whatever you call this today. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah. So yeah, it was good. It was a good series. I love Graham, and yeah, I just wish that yeah, I would have done things a little bit different. But I don't know, man. Netflix is like, I don't know how you feel about Netflix. And the weird thing is like this is probably the only thing I've watched on Netflix in the past like 2 3 years. I don't watch Netflix
Oh,
at
really?
all anymore. Yeah, I don't know.
I kind of usually just watch a few different things between different apps. It depends on what I'm watching. I wouldn't say I really use any of them in particular that much more or less than the others, although I guess most of the time lately I seem to watch stuff more on Netflix and Disney Plus than anywhere else.
Yeah,
Yeah. I guess
we're trying to.
uh, some of them have been like 90s sitcoms. Like I rewatched all of Seinfeld and I'm rewatching all of Everybody Loves Raymond.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just, yeah, funny you mentioned 90s stuff. I was just gonna mention that I've been watching, like, I've been going back and watching old 90s movies that I never saw, and I'm just trying to like, oh yeah, I remember this. Like I started to watch Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels the other day, which
Oh, that's a good one.
yeah, I'd never seen that movie before, but I was like, oh, it's made in the 90s. It was a good movie, and then throw it on. Like I'm going back to like search for older stuff as like my go-to for like as opposed to, like, I don't know, for some reason I don't find any new Netflix shows intriguing or interesting at all, and I don't have any interest in seeing any new. I feel like everything that's out these days is pretty much garbage. You know what I mean? Or shit. I'll watch something that's like super. Like I watched, obviously, Parasite, and what's the other Korean one that was everything
Oh, Squid
all
Game.
all as yeah, Squid Game and everything all the time, or what was the movie that came out
Oh,
this year?
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I once, yeah, like I'll watch those kind of movies that everybody's kind of the buzz movies everybody talks about. But other than that, man, it's like it's very rare that I'm into a TV or movie series these days that really is like, you know what I mean? That
Yeah,
I
I
put
know what
on
you
and
mean.
it's like, whoa, that's fucking amazing. I don't
Well,
know.
a lot of the stuff that I seem to watch is like basically me catching up on stuff that was super popular a few years ago. Like I've been like I only recently watched The Mandalorian, for example, that was super
Mm.
popular like at least 3 years ago.
Yeah, it was super popular. I never made it through, man. I think like if there's 20 episodes, 2 seasons or something like that, maybe I did episodes in season one, then gave
Oh,
up after
really?
that. Yeah,
That's some of my favorite Star Wars content to be honest, because it's like a little more gritty, kind of like a Western. I get
yeah,
why people would think the whole Baby Yoda thing is way overused, but I'm totally a sucker for it anyway because he's so cute.
yeah. No, the Baby Yoda thing was was cute. I just need more to the story than you know what I mean? Like, I'm character driven when it comes to that, but I need plot. I need like, you know what I mean? I need the five. I need the Mike Trout of. I need fall 5 stars in there to like, blow me off if it's going to be some, especially these days. You know what I mean? If you're like sitting down to watch a movie or a TV show, it's got to be the worst is when you get invested into a movie an hour in and you're just like, what am I doing? This is fucking garbage.
Yeah. I definitely bail on movies and shows sometimes more than I used to, but I used to just be the type of person that would finish them anyway, even if I found them boring. But now if I'm like an hour into a movie and I still don't like it, I'm just gonna bail on it. Or
Yeah.
if I watch 3 episodes of a show or something like that, I'll probably bail on it. Most of the time they're good enough for me to at least finish a season or something like that. But I bailed on like that new Resident Evil show, for example. I bailed after 3 episodes because in my opinion, often when people criticize a show because it's supposedly woke, it's it's either not anywhere near as bad as they say it is, or it's bad for different reasons than that it's woke, which is my opinion of the recent Lord of the Rings of Power show. But this is one clear example where the major problem was that it was just way too cringy and woke.
Yeah, and that's my problem with half these shows is there's just if it's woke at all, I can see it, and unfortunately it tarnishes it. I try not to let it affect me, but if I see something woke, I'm just like, all right, see, I'm out. You know what I mean? And the other thing that I think ruins a lot of this shit too is group think and group writing. Like a lot of movies and TV shows are written now with fucking 12, 14 writers stuffed in an office room hashing out these fucking scripts and ideas constantly for 8 hours a day and then doing the thing on repeat Monday to Friday. Whereas it used to be back in the day, like Stanley Kubrick and all these guys, like way back, they would get like one crazy fucking writer. Stephen King would go through and he would just like hash out, here's the plot, here's just how the character go, here's the character development, this is what you're going to do along this, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't exist anymore. There's not one crazy guy that, okay, we're just going to let him ride and go nuts. And if it is, it's like Quentin Tarantino or just these random guys.
Yeah.
Most
The
TV
only
shows
the
and most
only
movies are written by
yeah.
like a group of people that are all worried about what the other people in the group are going to do. So there's not really any good, like, you know what I mean?
The only one I can think of who's still working because Quentin Tarantino has retired from making films now is
right.
Christopher Nolan. I think he's the only one I can think of who's like a visionary director who takes himself very seriously and makes mind-blowing films and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I think we did one of his. What was the movie that we did recently of his? Was it?
I think I think the most recent one we talked about was Memento a while ago. I don't think we talked about one of his recently. I would love to do a movie chat on one of his movies soon, though, now that you mention it.
Did we not do The Dark Knight of his?
No, we didn't.
Oh, okay. Anyway, yeah, man, we can do the movie thing.
Yeah, maybe I was thinking about what we would maybe do for our next movie chat, you and Dusty and I. Maybe we should talk about I think maybe Inception. That's probably my favorite Christopher Nolan movie. Do you want to talk about that one?
Sure. What is? Oh yeah. Okay. I'll have to watch it again. I remember it now, but I was just like, how does that one go? Good. That's the one where
That's
it's
the
like New York
dream one.
City. Yeah, and it's like nobody's there, and they have to film. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll have to go back and
it's
watch that.
Also as Ellen Page before she became Elliot Page.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great movie. All right, well, were there? Oh yeah, actually, I was gonna say, were there any other aspects of the documentary or the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis in general you wanted to mention? And then I thought of one myself. We mentioned how there were different, like they went into different structures in the series that Graham Hancock hadn't examined before. and some that I hadn't heard of too. Like I'm forgetting most of the names other than that place in Malta, but
Hmm.
there's one, I think it was maybe the first one they went over, which was basically this hill with a whole bunch of rocks strewn all over it. And it was one of those many ones that they thought was naturally created at first, but then they found out that it actually is an ancient megalithic structure. I thought that one was really interesting because it looks so different from what you think of as a megalithic structure.
Yeah, it doesn't look like much. Like the drone footage they show in Netflix, it looks like just a hill with the rocks, and you would walk over that and be like, who cares? But yeah, another thing that's helped Graham along the way has been ground penetrating radar. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
that's what uncovered Göbekli Tepe, and I know what you. I know. Yeah, it was like in Thailand or something like that where they found this one. I remember. I remember. I know what episode you're talking about, but same thing. Ground penetrating radar. That's how they uncovered um, this stuff, and yeah, I think that's going to be like obviously that's going to be key going forward with other finds that kind of you know what I mean. Um, yeah, that was an interesting one. The ancients knew, and going back to what you said earlier, or the city underground, it's almost as if they knew maybe these or to prepare for something that might be coming down. And we have, you know, if we were to get destroyed today, we probably have the same things left over with these like nuclear bunkers and these millionaires that have built like these underground layers in Nevada and shit like that in case shit hits the fan. Like we would saw these things kind of left over if shit hit the fan right now, right? So
Hmm.
um
And
it's
they
just
could have possibly detected uh, meteors or something like that if they were really close, because part of their technology that would have been possibly more advanced than we thought was that they could have had some sort of primitive telescope or something like that. That sort of
yeah.
thing is not really that easy to build, I don't think. So they could have seen into space a little bit, perhaps enough to see approaching comets when they're really close and about to hit or something like that, and maybe enough to know that they happen on a relatively regular basis or something like that.
Yeah, well they were aware of what is it called? The precession of the equinoxes. Have you heard of it?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And doesn't that I'm just looking at it right now because I forget it's a crazy amount of time.
Yeah.
Precession of the equinoxes caused by the cyclic precision of the Earth's axis of rotation, completing its famous star catalog, completing in 129. How long does it take, though? It's some ridiculous amount of time.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Axis of rotation of 25,000 years or something like that. So
Oh, wow.
maybe that's something else. It's a ridiculous amount of time. I don't think that's right.
I'm gonna look that. Yeah, no, yeah, you're right. I just looked how long is the precession of the equinox, and it says about 25,756 years.
Yeah, but they knew about that, right? So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, exactly.
they were aware of that because they were structuring or they built the pyramids based on those kind of measurements or whatever, like um
Orienting the blocks north to south and that sort of thing.
that's right, yeah, they're like true north depending on when they were first built. They're a
Hmm.
little bit shifted obviously because the earth has shifted a little bit. But yeah, if they yeah, again, going back to kind of where I was going with music is they were more in tune with things than we give them credit for. So yeah, if you're aware of precession of the equinoxes, that's a yeah you would you wouldn't know that unless you pass that down from generation to generation through text and you were paying attention to the stars and calculating their everyday movements and really tracking the what do they call that when you track the stars?
Uh,
Astrologists,
that's astronomy. Yeah.
astronomy. Yeah.
Astrology is the more woo-woo stuff, but I think basically it seems like in general they believed in and thoroughly studied both astronomy and astrology. So
Hmm.
one of them was really useful and they connected the perhaps less useful one to the useful one, which is why it's so fascinating that they have like the structures lined up with the comets and that sort of thing. And you can see that in other realms of science too, like for example, people who used to study alchemy, basically
Yeah.
invented chemistry through pursuing this woo-woo stuff. They invented a legitimate science.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, the precession of the equinoxes and um, Göbekli Tepe. I think those are two those are like the OJ bloody glove. You know what I mean? Those are like, what do
Yeah,
you do? What do you do about that? You can't run away from Göbekli Tepe. Here you have this ancient, like, megalithic monument, huge. How did you move those, right? And they're from rocks that were gathered 50 million miles down the way. How did they move that? These were supposed to be hunter gatherers. How, if you're an archaeologist, you can't explain that, or you'd have to do some kind of really verbal flash dance. You know what I mean? To come up with some kind of explanation for that.
hmm
But that and the procession of just them knowing about it. You know what I mean? That's
yeah. Like you were saying, they basically would have had to have like passed down knowledge throughout tens of thousands of years of a civilization, perhaps, to be able to be aware of this precession of the equinox and how the constellations changed throughout a roughly 25,000 year period of time, that's really fascinating.
yeah, it's really fascinating. Yeah, it's funny because, man, I don't know how many times I've had conversations about people about history, and they think that, like, anything 50 years from 1950 and beyond was just like complete. Everybody was just fucking retarded. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
nobody
yeah.
knew shit. They were just like writing shit on stones, and they barely knew how to, like, which isn't the case, man. You know what I mean? Like, I I sometimes even think that they were a lot smarter than what we know now, even with the vast amount of knowledge that we have
Yeah.
now. We're just
Just
we're
in
just
like
drowning in too much information these days.
yeah, like in different ways because with the internet, for example, I think it's that more information is produced in a day than used to be produced in an entire lifetime for one person. But like you were
Yeah,
saying, a lot of it is just totally useless information or just like just totally fake shit that people are making up or anything like that. And these people could have been just as smart as us, or perhaps even smarter, but in totally different ways. Like they didn't have what we define as modern science and technology and stuff, but they were perhaps totally advanced in other completely different ways too.
yeah,
And also we did another detail that Graham Hancock talks about all the time is that, like you were saying there, contrary to popular belief, the human brain is body, and body has not changed in the past, I don't know, 100,000, 200,000 years or something like that. So we basically have the same brains and
yeah,
bodies and mental capacities, and we're the equal amount of we have the equal amount of intelligence, the equal amount of body strength, that sort of thing. We haven't changed in that way. It's just our culture and technology and that sort of thing that's changed.
yeah. It's fucked up. I was just gonna mention that. I was just thinking Dunbar's number while you were saying that speech right there, because that's it, right? Like, we haven't moved past being able to memorize more than 150 people or keep track of those people in our lives. Same goes with the information. Maybe we're just drowning in McDonald's bullshit, and like 90% of what we consume is just nonsense. And Marjorie Taylor Greene wearing some stupid dress at the,
I
you know
was
what I
I
mean?
was
Like,
just I was
it's
just
just like,
thinking about that, about how like all of the political channels I follow, sometimes I get sucked into the nonsense, but a lot of the time what they report on is just like stupid culture war bullshit, or like people feuding about stuff. Like like one of them recently was Steven Crowder feuding with Daily
Daily
Wire
Wire.
because they offered him a contract and he didn't like it enough or something, and now they're all like insulting each other, which I just think is hilarious.
Yeah, but have you noticed that? Like, I don't know what happened, but that has really escalated since Elon took over Twitter. I wonder if the algorithm has kind of changed. And I was having this discussion the other day with a buddy of mine, because yeah, you got Daily Wire and Crowder fighting. You got that whole thing going on with Eliza Blue, Tim Pool, and the quartering and all that nonsense. There's a lot of
Oh,
in-group
I didn't know
fighting.
about that. What's happening there with Tim Pool and the quartering and all them?
Yeah, so Eliza, do you know who Eliza Blue is?
No.
So she's some sex traffic advocator that came in. I'm on the Michael Malice community, and she kind of creeped her way into there. But anyway, she ended up getting, or Elon Musk put her in charge of like getting rid of all the sex trafficking shit on there. Anyway, it turns out she was a huge grifter. She used to be like a porn, or not a porn star, but she used to be in all these like world star hip hop videos back in the day. And she's like advocating for sex trafficking, but she used to be like, an OnlyFans or an e-girl or some shit like that. I don't know the full story because honestly, I don't really care to pay attention to all this nonsense. You know what I mean? I just like read headlines, but the quartering was like saying she was a grifter. Tim Pool was defending her because she's been on Tim Pool's show a bunch of the time, and Tim Pool was saying no, she's like legit, but it turns out she wasn't legit, and he's not going to backtrack on it. And then now the quartering, who used to be friends with Tim Pool because he's been on there a few times, now they're in some kind of feud. But this is going on like everywhere I look, man. Like, yeah, there was some going on with like Bosch and David Packman on the left,
Oh,
or
really?
yeah. There's like a lot of in-group fighting going on right now. Yeah, the Stephen Crowder Daily Wire shit. There was something else too that was like, ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, I can't remember what it is, but there's been a lot of these like, and like honestly, this stuff is like so stupid, man.
It really is, yeah.
It really is like this Jordan Peterson versus the Daily Wire and like or Stephen Crowder. Like, who cares? Why are you guys airing out your contract grievances in front of the world? You know what I mean? Like,
It's just for the
more
drama,
important
man. It's so obviously just for the drama.
issues. 100%.
Stephen Crowder's like, I'm going to court a lot of attention by complaining about my feud with Daily Wire, and then Candace Owens is like, well, I know Ben Shapiro has slightly more integrity than me at least, so I'm going to like insult him and allude to having dirt on him and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I know. It's so weird, man. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, all the infighting,
Twitter drama.
Twitter drama is hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, and like Project Veritas and James O'Keefe getting ousted. There's so much weird shit going on these days where I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think people just get way too sucked into political drama because they're way too online. Like they're scrolling through Twitter all day long every day and fighting with people online and shit like that.
Yeah, I think that and I don't know. I think people get attracted to distractions a lot too, and I'm guilty of this. Like, I just rambled off for 15 minutes about bullshit that nobody outside
Yeah.
of you and
Yeah,
me
yeah.
knows, outside of Twitter, right? So I
Yeah.
am kind of paying attention to it, but at the same time, like, I'm not paying attention to it because it's just nonsense. But I think that's what's frustrating to me is like I see all these like these people fighting about stupid shit all the time. I don't know. It's so dumb. It's
Yeah, it
what
really
is
is.
this? Who's behind? Who's you know what I mean? Who's moving the chess pieces behind all this? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Maybe it's just that there's still the algorithms that are basically pushing people into drama so they can stay online as much as possible, which is how the algorithms have worked for a long time. And that hasn't really changed since Elon took over Twitter. That would be my theory.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird because you're right. We're attracted to drama. You know what I mean? We're attracted, unfortunately, to more negative drama than we are positive drama, right? Like, there's an
Hmm.
earthquake going on right now in Turkey, and I think they said 20,000 people are dead, and nobody gives a fuck about that. But yet, everybody knows about this stupid balloon that went over the United States,
Yeah,
right? So it's just like,
I saw that the other day too. I half seriously considered making a video called "Everyone Cares About Balloons Now" for some reason.
yeah, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just we're distracted by such little low hanging fruit all the time. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? But yet there's such big things coming down the pipe, and you know what I mean? People on the left and the right fall for this shit all the time politically. Like, this Biden just gave a State of the Union the other day, and if you listen to the left, everybody on the left was like, "Oh, wow, it was a pretty decent speech. They did pretty good. As speechwriters should be patting themselves on the back." And then if you listen to the right, it was the worst speech ever. And it's like, okay, why do you guys still paying attention to this fucking old 90-year-old guy that's even lying to both of you? You know what I mean? Like, you don't understand that both of you guys are just corrupt.
It's so
Yeah,
funny too. Like the another example of that too is I was thinking about how it was revealed that Trump was hiding FBI documents, and then more recently it was revealed that
that
Biden
Biden.
was also hiding FBI documents.
Yeah, there's a side of me that loves when shit like that happen. It's like it looks good on you fucking idiots. You know what I mean? Looks good
Yeah.
on the right because they get so up in arms about, oh well, it's just it's not nuclear codes or anything like that. It's just he just has these documents, and then like Biden does the same shit, and it's like, oh look, Biden does it too. You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, they're 90 years old. These fucking idiots are 90 years
Yeah.
old. Of course, they're leaving documents all over the place. What do you expect? Why are you getting mad about this shit? And I don't know what codes are they. I don't know. It's funny how people get so involved in politics when the funny thing is politics doesn't really move the needle much at all these days. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. People think it does a lot more than it actually does.
Yeah, it doesn't do fuck all, man. Like Joe Biden, Justin Trudeau, all these people don't do fuck all. They're just puppets, and
Well, I
yeah,
mean, even on even in terms of Justin Trudeau, even on the CBC, I was watching recently about that whole thing with Justin Trudeau committing something like $200 billion to basically
healthcare.
supposedly fixing healthcare. And even when I saw people debating this on the CBC, they were basically saying this is basically a band-aid so they can say they did something and this problem is going to come up again soon also. So
Yeah, and like I had a picture the other day, or I was just looking at today, where we spend like so much on the healthcare, yet our healthcare is like shit. You know what I mean? They spend less in like Japan and other countries, and they get way better results.
that's why I agree with, and again, even a few people on CBC were making this point. The point should be to allocate the funds better and to actually make sure you're using the money efficiently rather than just throwing money at the problem and assuming that it can magically fix it in that way.
Yeah, I'm putting up this chart so you guys can see that, but that's like Canada's number one healthcare spending. But look at where we rank in the world as far as like doctors, hospital beds. You know what I mean? Like all this stuff is like really bad. And
Hmm.
yet Australia, who doesn't put that much money into this shit, is like, I don't know. It's Yeah, I could be here all day talking about healthcare.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. Yeah.
But yeah, these systems are broken. They're broken because there's just too many people that are in managerial positions that are just there to protect their jobs and their assets and aren't actually doing anything to improve companies or better people's lives. They're just there to just pick up a paycheck and escape at the end of the day.
Hmm.
So, and
Yeah,
then you can say that about
unfortunately.
education, healthcare, you name it, right?
Hmm.
Netflix series writers, they're all the same.
Yeah, 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 for sure.
Yeah.
I just lost my train of thought.
Yeah. Anyway, I gotta get
Right.
going. It's almost
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I
yeah,
know it's super late for you. All right, well, thanks for talking, man. This is
yeah, man.
always
Thanks for having me
fun.
on.
Yeah, no problem.
It's been
Yeah,
a
I
while.
mean
It's
that.
been a while.
Yeah, yeah, I know this was super fun to talk about. We can we should talk about maybe you and I should do podcasts more often and think about other topics because you can talk during the week and Dusty can't. So we do that more often if you want to. Like,
Yeah, man. I've been thinking about like getting back into the podcast game. So like we should just do like I don't know, if you want to do like a weekly or even a bi-weekly show where we get together every 2 weeks and just talk about
sure.
whatever stupid shit other people are complaining about.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good idea too. Yeah,
I can
yeah, for
ramble
sure.
about whatever topic that
Yeah, yeah,
I know about. I won't talk about topics that I hate when people try to talk about topics that they don't know shit
yeah.
about. So I won't
Well,
do that.
that's why,
But
for example, I've basically barely made any videos about the whole Russian-Ukraine conflict because it's super important, but also very confusing and complex.
yeah, man, dude, let's set it up next week. Let's get together and talk about Russia, Ukraine. I
Sure.
can probably do an hour on that for sure.
Yeah, yeah. All right, sure, man. Yeah, let's do that. All
Yeah,
right, cool, man. All right, thanks. fun as always. Thanks everyone for watching. I know we went off topic there at the end, but I hope you enjoyed our discussion about advanced civilizations and the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis and Graham Hancock and all of that. And yeah, next week I'll probably do at least a little more research before then, but yeah, we'll talk about the whole Russia-Ukraine situation. That should be fun. And yeah, check out also this weekend, because we didn't do it yet, I'm going to talk with Dusty about that movie Fat Man that we were going to discuss, in which Mel Gibson plays a badass killer Santa Claus, and also the elves end up manufacturing weapons for the US military. So that's a fun movie. And yeah, subscribe to the channel, share this chat everywhere, click that like button, click the bell to be notified when I come out with new videos, and check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description of the video as always. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And look into Graham Hancock's work and the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis. It's very fascinating. And check out that series, Ancient Apocalypse.
Yeah, watch the Netflix show.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, before we go, anything you want to say there, Chris? You want to plug your music and stuff?
Yeah, you can check me out YouTube, Twitter, and YouTube, Twitter, and that's pretty much where I am these days. Spotify, yeah, Chris J Niles. Type it in, and that's my music, and yeah.
It's spelled that way. You have it there in your label there, eh?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, check out his music. It's cool, like chill rock, I think, like dad rock, as you described. Yeah,
yeah,
very good. It's very good.
Thanks,
yeah. All right. Thanks again, everyone, and adios until next time.